We're at 7, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's, because I watched the select board last night, I will call the FinCom meeting to order. Pretty good. All right, so Chuck, Chuck, you have everyone, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna call the school committee meeting to order. Tom?
Here.
Aaron? Not here. Sean? Not here. John?
Here.
Carla?
Here.
Chuck is here. So we have a quorum. We're in open session.
Great. And you got Sean now too, Chuck.
And Sean is here.
And we have Andrew, Eric, Mark, Marianne, and Jane in for us. Good. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Going through so our first meeting in a while, and so welcome everyone back. Good to see you all again. So we'll we're in the hey Nick, we're in the budget stretch now, and so now this Wednesday, and then I think the following 3 or all the way to the 17th, we will have meetings every Wednesday, kind of going through both school and town kind of budget presentations. So tonight, you received this earlier. Well, you received the stuff from Gail a while ago. I don't even want to date it because Gail, you're way ahead of the ball game. But so we got that, and then we got it, the packet earlier this week. So I'm not sure if Dr. Doherty, if it's you or Gail is going to kind of kick off and kind of go through this, or.
Yeah, I'm going to do a short intro, and then I'm going to turn it over to Gail. So we thank you very much, by the way, for giving us the opportunity here. I know that some of you were part of our budget presentation, so some of this may be redundant, but we are certainly very open to going into any direction you would like tonight in answering your questions, or we do have a short presentation available that we can do as well. But before I turn it over to Gail, I want to thank the committee, the school committee, for all of their support during this budget process. This has been, as we know, a different year. The budget process actually was fairly uneventful this year, even in spite of all of the challenges and uncertainties that we were facing. I want to thank the committee for their support during the process and for approving the budget that you see this evening. So I will turn it over to Gail, and we can pull up the presentation, or we can just take questions, whatever works for you.
We have, so Ed, it's a pretty short presentation. We weren't sure a lot of them are pretty much the same slides we presented to school committee. So we have really high level, if you wanted to go with that and then open it up to questions. We have all of the other presentations we did to school committee, but that would probably take us days to get through. So we weren't necessarily going to do that. So if you'd like us to just sort of do a really quick overview and then open it up, if you think that might be helpful to level set.
Yeah, I think that would be. I mean,
Okay.
I think that would help. I mean, I'm sure folks will have kind of questions, or maybe already have them prepared. But I think it'll be great to to do that, and that could even just flush out a few extras.
Perfect. And I have to thank John, who is going to be the Vanna for me this evening, since after a year of doing this, I'm still not good at sharing my screen. So John agreed to do the slides for me. We just wanted to, I thought I would give just a quick summary. As most of you know, we presented to school committee. We had 4 meetings in January, And just as a little background to that, obviously this process started in October with the financial forums that we had, that the Finance Committee ran. That sort of kicked off the process. We did have one meeting in December where we do a broad overview of the budget. We take that time in December just to remind folks how the budget's built up, the cost centers, the source of fundings, but it really kicked off in January with 2 full nights of presentations. And then we had the public hearing, and we also used that night to address questions that the committee had for us. And then on January 25th, the committee did approve the budget as we had presented it, with a few changes, as folks probably saw at the end of the budget process. And then we were able to present that to the town manager by the January 31st deadline. And it was a balanced budget. We did present it in accordance with the guidance that we received from the Finance Committee. And I know several folks attended these meetings, so we do appreciate that. I know it was a long month of budget meetings, so I appreciate that folks took the time to do that. So I thought what we would do is a really high-level overview. One of the items, and I know our approach and how the town did it might be slightly different, but we did want to level set a little bit. As you guys are aware, within the current FY21 budget, we do have $180,000 of one-time COVID expenses that were approved as part of the budget process and then in town meeting. Those were always intended to be one-time expenses that have not been carried forward into the FY22 budget. So as part of all of our preparations, we built the budget assuming that we were back to some semblance of normalcy next year. So we added this slide just to show people pure number to pure number what the percent changes were. But then if we pull out the one-time COVID expenses, we do tie to the 3.2% that the town manager had discussed for the operating budgets being up. And overall, the school budget is up 2.97% when we add in the accommodated costs. This next slide is, we included it here. This is what the school committee actually votes on, which is the ending budget for each of the 5 cost centers. This shows the percentage increase for each one. And just as to continue to level set, the school facilities budget is where the $180,000 has been budgeted. We put it in there with the thought that most likely it would be for PPE or cleaning. So we kept it within the school facilities budget, and those expenses have not been carried forward into next year. Just to point out a couple of the larger changes that you will see within the administration cost center and the facilities cost center. We did make some changes to our extended day offset that we discussed with the school committee during the budget presentation. So as a result of decreasing that offset, the percentage change year over year in those 2 cost centers looks higher than it traditionally would be. This next slide breaks down the expenses in a little bit more detail. And just to level set again for folks who may not have be remembering all the way back to December when we had our little primer on this, the professional salaries, that includes all of the administrators, department directors, teachers, and specialists are included within that line item. Clerical secretaries, that includes the administrative staff within central office, as well as all of the secretaries across the school district. The other salaries is where our paraprofessionals, our substitutes, and our custodians are budgeted. Within the contract services, the largest items in there are legal fees, transportation, as well as our outside cleaning contractor that we have at the high school and the Coolidge Middle School. Supplies and materials includes our curriculum, materials, technology, software, and our various classroom supplies. So that's where you'll see all of the building-based budgets are typically within that line item. The other expenses, the largest line item in there is our out-of-district tuition, and then it does include some dues, memberships, as well as professional development. And the 180,000 of the one-time COVID expenses is within the supplies and materials line for the most part. This next line item, what we typically we get asked is what the change in each cost center is year over year. So we've built out this slide to show people how the various percentages year over year in the cost center budgets. And you can see a lot of the cost centers stay relatively consistent year over year. For the current year within special education, one item that had changed, and you may have noticed in the accommodated costs, is that that number did not go up as significantly as it has in prior years. And one of the main drivers for that was we have increased circuit breaker funding in the current year that we use this year's circuit breaker for next year so that we're able to budget it fact certain. And we did see an increase in that, partly due to changes in how they are funding it and an increase in the funding percentage. That number can fluctuate year to year depending on state funding, as well as what our overall expenditures are. So if we have a decrease in our expenditures, which is what we would hope if we're able to bring kids back in district, that number could go down year over year as well. But this year we do have increased circuit breaker, which is why the percentage increase was lower this year. We also thought it might be helpful just to walk folks through what some of the most significant budget drivers are. And this is really how we look at it when we develop the budget. We do have funding for contractual step and COLA increases for all of our represented and non-represented employees. We do want to point out to folks that all 5 of our collective bargaining agreements are ending in the current year, and we are in the process of starting to negotiate those. So we will be monitoring that as we go through it. And for the non-represented, we have placeholders in there based upon guidance that we received from the school committee. As we're building out our special education budget, we do look at all of our known and potential out of district placements. So we build that out based upon what we know. We look at any students coming up through the various grades, and if there are any potential changes in placements, we put those in there. And we also look at any known increases in the tuitions for those. We are fortunate for the out of district that we do have a contract in place for our out of district transportation, so we know the increase for that next year. We have included curriculum material in there as we do each year. Next year, we are targeting grade 6 math curriculum and social studies curriculum. And we're also looking at some elementary math curriculum materials. Those typically get flushed out as the year goes on, and we have the various committees that we develop to look at the curriculum, make the determinations, and then we would actually price out what it is we're purchasing. But we do put placeholders in the budget so we know where we're targeting our resources. We also know that some of our remote learning curriculum materials have been very successful this year, and we want to make those part of our core instructional program. So we have included funding for those. We also continue to look at all of the various grant funding that we have. We do have several grants that will be extending into the next 2 to 3 years. So to the extent we're able to put some of these on those grants, we will do that as well. But the timing of the grants isn't definitively known as we're doing the budget. So for some of the renewals, we did incorporate those into the core budget. We also have funding for a literacy assessment for the elementary grades. And we did build in an anticipated increase for our regular day transportation, which would be our mandated K-6 transportation, athletics, and extracurricular. We are actually coming off of a 5-year contract, so we will be going out to bid on that in the upcoming months. So we do not know fact certain what that will be. We know it's a very volatile market right now, especially with everything that has happened with COVID. So we did build in some assumed increases for that. One of the other large drivers, or actually the largest driver in our budget, is personnel. And one of the items, and we actually worked very closely with the town on this, where I've said it numerous times, we're very fortunate to have a very good working relationship with the town manager. We were able to fund a special education literacy coach, which has been one of our focus areas over the past couple of years. We were able to fund that through our accommodated costs. In looking at our out-of-district tuitions, we've made the determination that this is a key area that we want to focus on. And the goal would be that this should be able to help us ideally prevent some out-of-district placements in the upcoming years. And even if we were to prevent one out-of-district placement in transportation, this position would basically pay for itself. So we will be working very closely with Dr. Stice over the upcoming months to formalize the job description and look to start hiring this over the summer and have it in place for the beginning of the semester in September. We also had a few positions that we added this year as part of the budget that we've continued into next year. We had a 0.3 FTE in an elementary specialist that was able to allow us to improve the scheduling between the schools. We tend to have a lot of folks traveling between all of the various elementary schools, so this allowed us to enhance that. We also had a very slight increase in a middle school health position of 0.1 that has worked out very well this year. As you can imagine, some of the 0.9 positions or 0.7 positions are very difficult to fill. So we worked very closely with the middle school principals to look at their staffing. We also, based upon we have a bubble class moving up from the 5th grade into the 6th grade. So we do have a reduction of a 1.0 elementary teacher reflected in the budget as well. And that's something we do each year as we look at our staffing needs. As we tell the school committee each year, the interesting part about our budget process is we are basically starting the budget 3 months into the current school year, and we're projecting forward for the next 18 months. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of uncertainty in those numbers as we're building out the budget. So we always highlight some of the items that aren't necessarily included. If there are any increases in student enrollment, homeless students, English language learner students, that we will not know until next September. So we can't budget for those items that we don't know. And also if there are any additional special education costs related to out-of-district placements that we weren't aware of, changes in IEP plans for the students, those we wouldn't capture at this point either. We do work very closely throughout the year to track any of these expenses, and we report back to school committee on a quarterly basis or sooner if necessary. The other item that we mentioned early on is, as of right now, we are not including any additional COVID-19 expenses in next year. And to the extent any of those will be continuing, we would work very closely with the finance committee as well as the town manager to address that once it becomes known. The main parts of that would be cleaning, disinfecting, or any additional staffing that might be needed as we go throughout the year. Those were the main highlights that we had. If there were questions that folks had, we're happy. As Marianne is already ready.
Sorry, I guess I missed this in the regular budget meetings, and I brought up your presentations. So under supplies and materials, that slide under Jennifer, it was like an early slide, general fund expenses by budget
Yep.
category.
Yep.
And that's the one, I'm just curious why it's still, even though it's a drop of 7% from last year,
Yep.
why it's historically still 200 to 300K higher than it had been in like fiscal year 18 and 19. I understand it includes new curriculum sometimes, but we were purchasing new curriculum in those years too. I mean, we're 300K more than fiscal year 20, 200K more than 19. I mean, fiscal year 18 feels like a long time ago, but that's another 300K. So what were those new expenses again for this year that, because I'm kind of like not looking at fiscal year 21 saying, okay, that's different. Is it the new math curriculum you guys were talking about?
The larger items that we have in there, I know we have had increases. I'm trying to pull up my schedule. I know the no atom, the science materials have increased in there. So those now are part of the supplies and materials because they're ongoing replenishments of that. So I know that tends to be a large item. I know the math curriculum is also included in there, and that has been increasing as well. Let me pull up
Marian, can I just
pull
ask
up.
what where you're getting that information? I'm trying to find it.
Yeah. So because Gail, had the slide earlier tonight, I went into, while you guys were here, I brought up on my other computer the fiscal year 22 school department budget process presentation, and I'm on slide 10, which is identical to what Gail had. This was from January 31st, 2021, and the slide is entitled General Fund Expenses by Budget Category. And so this slide has a column, it has professional salaries, clerical salaries, other salaries, contract services, supplies and materials with the asterisk because of the COVID expenses. Gail had this slide in her mini presentation. So if she scrolls back, it's like a blue and gray slide. I found what I think is the identical slide in the January budget presentations on the school website. So that's what because I tried to take notes and I couldn't take them fast enough when she did the slide. But if Gail scrolls back.
Because I talk so quickly too.
So are you asking why the final budget for FY21 is higher?
No, I'm asking for FY22, why it seems to be, if I skip 21, just because I know that there's COVID money, why 22 is like 300K more than 20 and 200K more than 19. Like, what was the big jump this year? Because I know in 19 and 20, we were also purchasing curriculum, like social studies curriculum.
Yeah, part of what also goes in there, some of the increases, Marianne, is we do have the elementary curriculum materials. We've increased their budget, and curriculum software is also part of that. So a lot of items were funded on the grant this year. We had the COVID ESSER grant that we had probably about $70,000 or $80,000 worth of curriculum material was on grants that we've now brought into the operating budget.
So we're trying to maintain a fiscal year
Yes.
21 expense, which we didn't have before. And
Exactly.
that's helpful. That helps me understand that.
Okay. Yeah. So some of it gets a little bit tricky when it's grant funded one year and then we move it into the operating budget in the next year. So I just pulled that up. One of the big items is the curriculum software. That typically is about $20,000 a year. Next year, it's $80,000. So that's a pretty significant.
Yeah, that's a big change.
Increase.
So Miriam, one example of that. So we're maintaining the Zoom license for next year, for example.
So that's
which-
under supplies and materials then, not technology or some other category?
Well, that is,
Yeah, some of the software is under here. We've also had some increases, like I said, in the curriculum materials as well.
So this is going to be an ongoing kind of, do you project this level of increase again each year? Or do you think this is now, okay, now we've learned it's good to have these new things?
I believe some of those, it may ebb and flow. We may decide one year, some of the curriculum softwares are not working. So we may reallocate that and then reassess it in future years, or What could also happen is if we get grant funding in one year and not another, we may be able to capture them on a grant. So we try to maximize the grants as much as possible. But this does take a look at we made an assessment on which items we felt we would be continuing to maintain going forward. So at the end of this year, we'll do a full assessment. So there may be items we said we weren't sure if we were going to continue them, but we are going to add them. We also do have some additional funding in grants next year. So we may be able to capture them one more year on a grant and then put them in the operating. So it's hard to say if this is the peak of it because we still do have grant funding next year.
Yeah, I guess my point was this is probably a category, given the way whatever happens in the future with what we've learned from online learning, we're probably going to have to allocate more to this category.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. That's all.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Actually, I have a question and it's related to this exact part of the budget, so it might be a good time to bring it up. So I'm looking at, I'm not quite sure what Marianne was looking at, but I'm looking at figure 14. It's page 30 to 31 of the budget. It breaks down the regular day into detail. And my question is actually, you sort of answered it, Gail, but I guess I want a little bit more color. Under supplies and materials, I'm generally comfortable with the increase of 2.3% because it's a 2-3% budget. That feels about right to me. My question is about the swings in the individual line items. So you see big swings in that area. So I guess my question is kind of what drives that and what is the process or the determining factors for where you do purchase new supplies and material this year and much less than you did the year before? Can you speak to that? It might be a Dr. Doherty question as well.
I'll be happy to start that.
Yeah.
One of the items, Jean, and this may go back into your way back school committee days, that is typically where the majority of the building-based budgets are. So each year the principals get a budget based upon their enrollment. The principals decide how they're going to allocate. So they may decide next year, this is all hypothetical, please don't quote me to the principals because they may or may not agree with this. So this year they're focusing on, they're going to do math. Next year they may say, oh, we know we need to do more in the library or the PE world. So the buildings decide how they want to allocate their funding. And then throughout the year, they can reallocate that based upon how the year plays out and what their actual needs are. So each of the 5 elementary, the 2 middle, and the high school all get a per pupil based budget that they are able to allocate. I work with them and we look at it. So if they add a new copier, we have to increase their copier expense. So you could see that line item go up and paper may go down because they may say we didn't go through as much paper as we need. So it's really building by building goes through each of the line items. So that's where you can see where some of the swings are. It's really dependent upon each building and what their needs are.
And you would expect those to change year over year, it sounds
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think what's going to make it tricky also this year, Jean, is because we've been in a hybrid model and you've got some weeks in person, some weeks remote, maybe as many supplies weren't as used as were originally budgeted. So now they're going to reallocate their funding for other things they know they're going to need for next year if we're in person.
And some of them may switch it to say, we'd like to do more professional development or memberships this year. So they're really looking at how to best utilize it in each fiscal year.
Thank you.
Any other questions from folks? And I'm not looking at the raised hand, so you can just shout it out. There's enough of us here. We're close enough. You can just shout it out. I don't need to necessarily have to monitor that. So yeah, just raise your hand or. Good, Jean did perfect.
I know, and the only reason I'm raising my hand again is I have another question, and Gail just alluded to it, so I think we have a natural segue. You mentioned the principals per building budget.
Hate when I give you a segue.
I'm like, oh, she just brought up my next question. if I read the budget correctly, that was cut a little bit and it continues to be down a little bit. And that raised a little bit of a concern. Can you talk a little bit about the decision-making behind cutting that and why we don't need to be worried about that, or why we shouldn't be?
So we did cut it this year. So as folks may recall, I feel like the budget process never really ended last year. We had done the budgets, and then obviously our budget was done pre-COVID pandemic. We actually, I think, had gone through school committee and finance committee, if I remember correctly. And then when we started getting further into the year prior to town meeting, we needed to make some budget cuts. One of the areas we had cut was the building-based budgets. And the rationale was really because at that point, we knew within the current year, we were going to have some extra funding. So to the extent that they needed to purchase equipment and whatnot, we could do that. We also, I think at that point, started to realize that the odds of being back, even though we were cautiously optimistic, being back full-time in person for the entire school year was not necessarily realistic. So as we mentioned, a lot of the day-to-day supplies weren't necessarily going to be needed, especially if you didn't have all the students in the building. So that was the rationale for last year. We did make a similar cut going into next year, mainly tied to having to do an adjustment to the extended day revolving account offset. The reason we are comfortable with that, Jean, is in full transparency and disclosure, these expenses tend to be the easiest to add back as the financial picture changes. One of the other items we do every year is we start the year, we automatically do a holdback of all of the building-based budgets at the beginning of the year, because this is one of the line items where we can control the expenses because it's not salary related. So we know at the beginning of the year, we always take a holdback anyway. So what we did was say, okay, next year as we look to reopen the schools, bring more students back, as we start to rebuild some of the other programs, this is a very easy area that we can say in November, December, okay, the picture has changed. We can add these expenses back relatively easier rather than look to dismantle or cut programs or staffing, which you can't easily add back mid-year. So it was a very well thought out process that we know we can easily add it back.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Keep going, Jean.
It's my last question of the evening, I think.
No,
So
can't be, won't be.
Then I'll shut up. And it's actually kind of a comment and then a question. So I was really surprised to see a 2% increase in the special education cost center. And you explained circuit breaker had increased, so that's great news. And I would like to highlight that that is good news, that a cost center that traditionally has been very volatile and very difficult to manage financially this year is very manageable. So I think that's great. The question is how sustainable, either from a circuit breaker perspective or looking into the management changes or operational changes in the area of special ed, how sustainable do you think that a sort of slower growth of increase in the cost center is, or is this just one good year of luck, don't count on it happening again? And that really is my last question.
I will, and I know Dr. Stice is on here, so I'm sure she does a great job correcting me if I go astray. So I think there's a couple of things, Jean, that have played into that. It definitely is, the circuit breaker piece was a very significant piece of it. I want to say the circuit breaker was up a significant amount from, yeah, I think it was 200,000 from last year. And part of that is it's funding. It's based upon what the state's final budget is. As you know, there are some years where they funded at 60%, 65%, 70%. I do think everything held normal in a normal world, but if you sort of put the challenges related to revenue tied to COVID aside, that under the new mandates that the state has put out, one of the items that they have said that they do plan to fund is the circuit breaker reimbursement at this minimum level. The other piece that we have not seen the impact of it yet, which could be another positive going forward, is there is a portion of transportation that will start to be reimbursed as well, and that will be phased in over multiple years. We have not seen that yet. We have not budgeted for that yet. So that is another glimmer of hope in the outlying years. The other part that did help us this year, which occasionally, if we have staff turnover, there are instances some years, and this was one of the years where you may have folks come in at a lower step on the salary scale than the person that has exited. We did have some of those this year, which assisted us as well, because you have the natural next year, because the person came in lower this year, you get the savings next year, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't necessarily anticipate that each year. You could have the opposite happen, where you have somebody at a lower step on the salary scale leave and you hire them at a top step. So we sort of had both of those happen. I will say Dr. Stice and I work very closely. If we don't talk every day, it's almost every other day where we it's either an email, a text, or a phone call every day, where we're comparing what's happened with placements, with transportation. We spent we've done a tremendous amount of outreach and work on our transportation, looking at bus routes, looking at how we're looking at some of these items. So that also helped us save some funding on the transportation side. So I don't anticipate every year having all of those. We just happened to have a really good year where the funding increased. We had savings. Part of it too is we've had savings in transportation because of COVID. We were very fortunate that we've negotiated another agreement with seeing that the transportation rates are flat year over year. That doesn't always happen. So I don't want to say it's a perfect storm, but we've had a lot of very positive items happen in the current year. And I'm hopeful that, especially with the new position we're adding, that we'll be able to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, it's good news for sure, particularly the information about the state perhaps upping the level of support. That's great news. Thanks.
I can't commit them to it, but it is part of their plan.
They did say it, yeah. We met with Senator Lewis the other day, and it's in their current legislation bill for next year.
I did have a kind of a follow-up, and Dr. Stice did a great job of, during the school committee meetings talking about the literacy coach. And so just because the one question I had about that is, and just more anecdotal, how common is, for other towns, is it to have a literacy coach? Are we, kind of unique in, from that perspective, or are we catching up? I just more curious than anything else.
You're talking about for special education?
Yes. Sorry, the new position. Apologies. Yeah, the new position.
Jen, I don't know if you want to answer or you want me to start and you can answer. It's a position that is becoming more common in school districts as the language disability is becoming more identifiable, I guess is probably the best way to put it. So I don't know, Jen, if you want to add to that.
No, I think you answered that really well. With all of the new research that's coming out around reading how the brain works and what are the specific tests, and then what are the programs that then need to meet students' individual needs, that is now becoming a much more common position to make sure we're matching the right instructional practices. And Gail did such a good job of answering the last question, but I did want to just say how well the teams work together and just highlight the level of detail that they go into. We are literally looking at every transportation bill and saying, actually, there was no school this day. We're not paying for this day. Why was this run there? It it is very, very intricate and detailed work that's happening between the teams. And I do think that it's very much paying off and helping us as a district to make sure we've got and we're doing what's right for kids.
Ed, if I could just piggyback back on your question on the coach. I know this question was asked of us last year. I think it was Sean that asked us the question when he was on the finance committee about things that we would want to do as investments to help, you know, more sustainable costs in the future. The literacy coach is an example of that.
Yep. I mean, I don't like to give Sean credit. I mean, because he's not on the committee anymore, but I think you're right. I mean, if it was possible for me to take credit for it, I would, but I can't. You know, I actually, it was in my notes to mention it at some point, not Sean's name specifically, but yes, but I do, you know, and I think, you know, again, it's something that we've talked about, you know, on the committee, you know, quite a bit. And I, you know, and I think, you know, even mentioned it during the school committee meeting. This is one of those things where just, I know you just, I'm thrilled with it. You know, I love the sound of it, and you know, I'm you know, very, you know, kind of curious as far as how it, you know, kind of matriculates and goes through. I think it's really, you know, really fascinating, and I'm really happy that we can do it.
And I will say I'll not to repeat myself, but we're very fortunate that we have such an open dialogue with our committee, this committee, as well as with the town manager, because we were able to basically work together to come up with a plan to fund this without it having to be a special request or anything else. So it was a very collaborative process. So we're excited for it, and we're, you know, looking forward to being able to report back on how we roll it out.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, to the extent that, you know, you start to exhaust that, you know, that list of, you know, the next, you know, types of things that you can pursue to be able to, you know, spend a little money to, you know, to save a little bit of money, you know, things of that nature. You know, again, I think it's definitely the, you know, fiscally the right way to be able to look at it when times are good, times are bad, you know. It's you know, and I think that's the other part of it that, you know, that, you know, at the end of the day, it's not lost on me, and not lost on, in the middle of all of this, to be able to identify this, you know, from a COVID perspective and everything that we're going through. I think it's just, you know, it accentuates that point of, you know, the collaboration between the town and the schools. Any other questions or comments? So was there anything else, Dr. Doherty, Gail, that from a presentation perspective?
No, that was it. That was it.
That was things, you know, that was it. It was enough. And I'm not, you know, I'm not begging for more. It's enough. The one thing that I didn't want to go too far, and I probably should have started with this. Dr. Doherty, I know this is your last, you know, budget.
Yeah.
And I just want to be able to, you know, on behalf of me, to thank you, you know, and you know, for all of the hard work, you know, for this budget and you know, kind of in previous ones. Again, this isn't you know, lost on me, you know, how challenging this has been, and I think Gail mentioned it. You guys have been meeting and talking about this for a whole year. It hasn't stopped. And so really appreciate and thank you for, you know, for all of you done for the town.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's a team effort. I mean, we've been fortunate, you know, Gail, I think this is either your 5th or 6th budget, right? I can't remember.
They're all blending.
Don't mention too many. Don't mention it. They're just going to scare her off.
But, you know, we're very fortunate that we have a great working relationship with everyone.
Well, I mean, and it reflects everybody, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, you know, and so I, again, from my perspective, you know, really, well, I wanted to extend my, you know, my thanks and appreciation.
Thank you.
Anything else as it relates to the school, you know, kind of presentation? might be able to let them go. They don't have to listen to our talk about the minutes. But anything else from anyone?
Hey, Ed, this is Andrew.
Yeah.
So this is more so towards you, Dr. Doherty, and the school committee. And it's just a quick question or something, you know, in the future, financially speaking. Are we taking, I know we did a study previously in the past, I think it was 2020 into 2021, some of the lean practices or how to reduce costs and improve quality. You know, is there a plan moving forward? It's more of a general school committee question about you know, reviewing, you know, sustains and improves. I'm sure you're doing that internally on your own, but on a fiscal or financial level, you know, just looking at the trending of the budget over the past, you know, 10 years.
I'm not sure, Andrew, I understand the question.
Yeah, neither did I.
So what I'm getting at is, you know, the overall budget requests over the course of 5 to 10 years has, you know, continually rose up, and, you know, a lot of that has to do with inflation and cost of the times. But are we collectively reviewing, I guess, the performance and the quality as it relates to the cost? Like where
So I think,
budget
yeah.
in 5 years is kind of, I alluded to this a few meetings ago, and I'm just getting at where do we see, you know, projecting outward? I know these are strange times we're living in, so you might not have an answer. It's more so just, you know, do we have things in place to start projecting outward 5, 10 years where we think that budget's going to be? Because if we just look 10 years ago to now, it's substantially millions.
So I mean, I understand what you're saying. I guess a couple of comments. One is, it's actually something we do on a monthly basis. We're
Yeah.
continuing to review our budgets and finding ways to make sure we maintain costs at a reasonable level. I think the investment that we brought up this evening with the position is an example of how we're trying to sustain special education costs over the long run. The investments we continue to make in curriculum and instruction are investments that we feel will long-term, you know, make student learning, and which would more beneficial for kids, and also that hopefully in theory would sustain and actually reduce special education costs. Your biggest driver in the school department budget, and this is not just in Reading, is salaries. I mean, 82%,
87%. In
87%
total, 87% of our budget is
is salaries.
salaries.
So that's a cost that's, you know, always going to be on an increase. And it's going to become more and more challenging as you try to retain your talent, and, you know, to prevent them from going other places. So I think, you know, we obviously we do everything we can in terms of taking a look at our costs on a weekly, monthly basis. And, you know, we do look at long-range planning as much as we possibly can.
I think, Andrew, too, I think what I thought I heard in your question too is, you know, the budget, when the budget is formulated, it is by the central office staff for presentation to the school committee. It's always formulated to align with, you know, the district goals and the district improvement plan.
Yep.
So, you know, that in and of itself, you know, the improvement plan part of it would, I think that's what you were asking. Are we making sure that we're getting the most for what we spend, or the best for what we spend? And, you know,
Yes.
that's always the goal when the budget is formulated.
Yep. I appreciate it. It's just, and I'm sure, you know, as population rises and everything else like that, that has a major effect on the requirements for staff, and therefore requirement for salaries. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No, I think that's an interesting point too, just, how deep that analysis is and, looking at those same types of percentages to, to budget, for those line items and how they look and how they project out. I think that's, kind of an interesting dynamic and again, how you kind of overlay that with, district improvement and stuff like that as well. So it's, again, I think it's not surprising, very reassuring, the cadence to which you do that. It's good to get reinforcement on that. Anything else for the school, as it relates to schools? And if not, then we can let Chuck's and the school committee off unless they want to stay and listen to us talk about the minutes.
Well, thank you, Ed. First of all, I really want to thank you and the committee for your thoughtful, good questions and hopefully support of our budget and your time tonight. We really appreciate it. And thank you to Gail and John for all the heavy lifting here. So I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
School committee.
School committee.
Tom,
Well, first I'll second that and then yay.
Carla,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Sean.
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice,
you.
Folks.
Good night, all.
Very much.
Have a good night.
Right.
All right, now we're down to, going over the minutes. And again, just to reiterate for everyone, so we will, we're on for the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th as well. I think we'll have the town ones on the 3rd and the 10th, and then I think we're voting on warrant articles on the 17th. So you really want to gear up for the 17th. Let's give some stamina because the 17th should be a barn burner voting on the warrant articles. So I think that's also St. Patrick's Day. So we're going to have to really kind of gear up here and have some, we'll spend the next couple of Wednesdays trying to figure out how we're going to celebrate, the warrant articles on St. Patty's Day. So I don't think we have anything else, but just kind of going over the minutes. But before we do that, just open it up. I don't know if anyone had any kind of questions or, kind of comments. Anyone but Mary Ann. I'm just joking. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
Just a question. So is the select board going to be here on the 3rd then?
I think so. They are posted for that, I believe. I revisited their last meeting last week and just reviewed it, and I'm pretty sure that it's on their calendar. I think that I heard that from Mark and Bob in some of the kind of back and forth. So I'm pretty sure that they're going to be on for that.
And all we need is a quorum of the select board there that day, not the whole select board?
I think, yeah,
I
just
know
a
that-
quorum.
Yeah, because it's the candidate forum that night for all the new candidates, RCTV. I saw it on one of the candidate websites, so Vanessa will probably have to be at that. But
If that's on the 17th, or is that which
no,
date
it's
is
on the
that?
March 3rd.
March 3rd, okay.
So I don't know, RCTV couldn't move it, but I saw that on it's at the same time as our meeting. And it's there to people to take questions. So that's one, but if we don't need a quorum of the select board, she'll just miss it.
Yeah.
And if they're
yeah,
recording it, so all of us who want to see it can see it at a later
Yeah.
time. We just can't ask questions.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure on the timing of that. I mean, and this actually kind of came up, Jackie had asked this question even for this week, as far as the timing, and for our meeting and whether it's for the 3rd or, kind of any of them going forward. If anyone has any, kind of, preference, to keep it at the same time, change the time, move it up, again, I'm not going anywhere. So, you know, my commute is super easy. It's usually a half a flight of stairs. So, I'm fine to, you know, kind of move around that time, if it makes sense for everybody else.
Well, like if the forum was set only 7 to 8, and I have to look up how long it is, like we could meet at 8 and then we could still look if we want to watch that meeting and then go to this one, but I have to go look where I saw it because I only saw it on one candidate's website. I haven't seen RCTV actually announce it. Let me see if I can bring that up again. I don't know if it's 7 to 9. 7 to 8 is a lot better than 7 to 9. You know, it depends on how long. If we only need 2 hours, it's not that big a deal. Let me see if I can find the person.
Does anybody, you know, how's everyone else, you know, kind of look schedule wise, you know, from a timing perspective, whether doing it at 6:30 or 7:30, you know, any of those, you know, kind of, you know, does anyone have any, you know, kind of big conflicts that they can, you know, see as of now?
Which date is that again? Sorry.
Yeah, it's next Wednesday, the 3rd.
Yeah, hold on. I'm just finding
Good.
the RCTV thing. Let me see. I can't really share a screen because I have this on a different computer. But yeah, it's Meet the Candidates Night. So they call it 7 to 8:30 p.m. So that's a little bit longer. And I don't know. Each candidate will have 10 minutes to speak and take questions. So it's like 2 select board candidates and 3 school committee candidates. And maybe light board, I'm not sure. No, just select board and school committee. So that's March 3rd. So I don't know how long where we're going over the town budget or any questions with that. And Bob has things to say. We probably can't cut our meeting too short. But
I would also want to check in with staff because one question is our ability to meet at 7 o'clock versus 8 or 8:30, but it's a bit of a heavy lift to ask staff to start that way. It's a late night for them.
Yeah, I mean, so again, from my perspective, you know, we can even, you know, even from a staff perspective to your point, Gene, if, you know, if it makes, you know, if it's easier for everyone for them to do it at 6:30, you know, and just, you know, kind of, it's, you know, worth it for us to be able to, you know, if we can accommodate that too, you know, I'm always open to that piece of it too. You know, obviously, but I don't want to, you know, do something that's going to completely disrupt and half of us can't make it. So
how long is the school committee one went pretty quickly? How long is the town one typically? Like, are they going to each go over 2 nights, the 3rd and the 10th, or will they get it all done in one night?
I don't know. I mean, I don't remember, to be candid. I don't remember how long.
Yeah, I know every year is probably
takes.
different.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if anyone else recalls. I don't know, Eric, if you remember how it, not to put you on the spot.
I mean, yeah, I remember those going a couple of nights because we worked through, you know, kind of each of the departments, you know, methodically. So till you know, that it's a big lift to do all that in one night. At least it hasn't played out that way over the past several years.
Sounds like it doesn't make sense to cut it short because you can't, we have a deadline, you know, you've got to do it first and not later.
Yep.
Well, that was all I had, just raising that because I became aware of this candidates night today.
Anything else from anybody? Okay. All right. So then let's. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Go ahead.
It's all right. I don't know if you would know or if Eric would know from last year, but if I just wanted to ping the town accountant for some information, like historical information, like trending data, would I go through you to make that, or is it okay if I just reach out individually? It doesn't affect anything. It's just things to bring up later.
I don't know. I'm going to default to Eric. I don't know,
I mean, I think I don't recall a situation like that, but I would guess it's Ed's preference, I just got to kick the red back to you there, Ed.
This is terrible. I mean, go ahead, Chief.
Yeah.
I have a thought, if it's helpful.
Oh, love it.
And it comes from other committee experience, nothing to do with FinCom, but on other committees that I've served on, it's generally, you do copy the chair on any requests of staff. And the reason is, in the event that 6 of us were like, I want to know this, I want to know this, the chair sort of needs to see that and say, whoa, 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 like there's a lot of conflicting stuff. Whereas if it's a one-off, one person, the chair can kind of shrug their shoulders and say, okay, let me know if there's a problem. So, for what it's worth, I think copying the chair might be a good idea, just so you know what conversations are happening between staff and members.
Yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee I'm going to read them, but yeah, definitely copy. No, I think that would be great. From that versus me having to do it, because then it would guarantee that it doesn't happen if it's on me to pass the baton. But yeah, copying me would that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to request some trending data. It might be a good thing for later future FinCom meetings to review some of the, previous long-term of where we are now with each committee's, different budgets that the FinCom reviews versus looking at it in the past 3 years at, 2.5%, 3% a year. Some of these have like a 30% increase over 4 years, and sustainability over time might be something to review in future FinCom meetings.
I agree, and again, I really, that's having that, that ability to be able, and it was kind of related to the question you had for Gail and Dr. Doherty, as far as that goes. Some of that analysis as far as like certain line items and how they project back and how they project forward, I think is it's kind of valuable information. There's usually a story around it, but but it's also kind of be able to know that trend. And then I think it gets back to even one of the questions that Marion asked too is, when is it a aberration, when's it a trend, and does it set a new baseline, things of that nature.
Right, exactly. So it's just random, just data. That's all.
Yeah,
that's all. I'm looking
exactly.
at is data.
Oh yeah, totally.
Not trying to pick anything out particular. It's just a smart move to review.
Yeah, not yet. We don't have to. We don't have to let them know what we're going to do with it.
Yeah.
All right, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, I think we can go to the minutes. I think that was the only thing, that was the last thing we had, right? Sorry, I had him up here for a second. Let's pull it back up. Yep. Yeah, the only things that we had were that in the minutes from November 4th. Whew. Good luck on this one, Jackie. This is going to be, us reviewing these minutes. I don't remember yesterday. All right, so Jackie, is that something you can share? Do we need to share that, or does everyone just have it from the packet? Doesn't matter.
I can bring it up if you want.
Yeah, let's bring it up, just so we know the technology is working.
Yeah, I can. Just bear with me 1 second.
No problem. Take your time. Actually, Jackie, don't worry about it. I've actually, now that I've read through it, I actually remember the meeting now.
Sorry,
So,
my computer was just really slow.
Don't worry about it. It's totally fine. As it relates to the minutes, any questions or comments as it relates to the minutes from the 4th? All right, I will entertain a motion for these minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes, Finance Committee minutes from the meeting from November 4th as written.
Thanks, Eric.
I second.
Thanks, Mary Ann. All right, we'll go to a vote, and I'll just do them as I see on the screen. Jean,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
and Ed. Yes, that's all of us. That's it, 7. Yeah, seven of us. Cool. Any other? Again, I know we just did any other things before we take the next motion.
Do we have a meeting next week? Do we have a time for that?
Yeah, so I was under the assumption that we would have one on the 3rd, and as of right now, it's still at 7 p.m. But we can. I'll coordinate with Jackie and Bob over the next couple of days, just to, if we change the time, or look to do that. But unless they something strongly comes from them, I don't know, from Bob, I don't think it'll probably still be at 7. All right, I can entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Thanks, Mary Ann. Thanks, Jean. We'll do the vote. Jean,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
and Ed. Yes. 7-0. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you.
Good
Take care.
night.
Thanks.
Thank you.